All right, welcome to your deep dive. And today we are diving deep into Dream State. Based on your review, it sounds like a really incredible read, this whole 50-year saga. It's spanning, well, 50 years, and set against the backdrop of Montana and Los Angeles. And knowing your love for complex characters and emotional depth, I think you're really going to connect with Eric Puchner's writing.
Oh, absolutely. Dream State is such a masterpiece of intricate relationships, the simmering tensions and the choices that kind of reverberate across generations. Now, your review did mention that you're drawn to like fast-paced narratives. And while this one, well, it unfolds over decades, trust me, the intrigue starts right from the first page. And guess what? It kicks off at a wedding in Montana.
Okay, a wedding already sounds pretty traumatic, but the review kind of hinted at some serious betrayal happening right at the beginning. So what's the deal with that?
Oh, yes, the betrayal. It all centers around Charlie, who is this charismatic anesthesiologist. And then there's his bride, Cece, and of course his lifelong best friend, Garrett. Now, Garrett is officiating the wedding. But this isn't just any best man, right? Garrett's harboring this deep-seated resentment towards Charlie, and it just explodes. It's a moment that completely shatters their friendship and basically sets the entire story in motion.
Whoa. Talk about bombshell.
Yeah.
So is this betrayal like the central conflict for the entire story?
It's definitely a catalyst, like the earthquake that sends those shockwaves through the lives of everyone involved. But what's fascinating is that Puchner doesn't really dwell on the immediate aftermath. Instead, he kind of jumps ahead and shifts the focus to Cece and Charlie's children, Lana and Jasper. And this is years later. So we see the fallout, the legacy that betrayal playing out in their lives, even though they were, well, just kids when it happened.
That is a really interesting approach. It's like we're seeing the ripples in the pond, like the long-term consequences of that initial explosion. It makes me think about how even, seemingly small choices can have these huge impacts down the line, especially within families.
Exactly. And this is where Puchner's mastery of character development really shines. He doesn't just tell us that these characters are flawed. He shows us through their actions, their internal struggles, and just the way they grapple with the consequences of that fateful day.
The review did mention these characters are flawed and deeply human. That really intrigued me. I'm always drawn to stories where the characters feel real, relatable, even if they make some questionable choices.
You and me both. And Puchner, he really excels at creating these nuanced and multifaceted characters. Take Charlie and Garrett, for example. Like, on the surface, they seem like those archetypes, the charming doctor and then that brooding artist. But Puchner, he digs deeper. He reveals the complexities of their friendship and the envy and admiration that simmers beneath the surface. And this is long before the betrayal even happens.
So it's not just a simple good guy, bad guy scenario.
Not at all. And that's what makes it so compelling. We see how their past experiences, their shared insecurities, and even their individual successes, they all contribute to that tension that ultimately erupts. And Puchner, he doesn't excuse Garrett's actions, but he helps us to understand them. So it creates the sense of empathy, even for the character who, inflicts the initial wound.
That's such a powerful way to approach storytelling. It makes me wonder about Cece's role in all of this. She just seems so caught in the middle of this complex dynamic between Charlie and Garrett. So what is her story?
Well, Cece is fascinating because she's both a victim and an agent of change.
Yeah.
She's deeply affected by the betrayal, but she also makes choices that have these ripple effects throughout the entire story. So we see her grappling with her own desires, her need for stability, and the, responsibility for her children.
It really sounds like she's not just a passive bystander in all this. Like, she's actively shaping how things play out.
Yeah.
Even if she's not always aware of the full impact of her choices.
Precisely. And that kind of leads us to one of the most, I think, intriguing aspects of Dream State.
Yeah.
It's how it handles time and memory. You mentioned that you really love those fast-paced narratives.
Right.
Well, this book, it spans decades, like we talked about. It jumps back and forth through time. But it's not just like a stylistic choice or anything. It's really intertwined with how our memories shape us.
Yeah, it's definitely not straightforward, not chronological, which I'll admit is a little outside my usual reading preferences, but I'm starting to see how it adds this layer of suspense, like keeping the reader guessing how these past events will impact what's happening in the present.
It's so brilliantly done. I mean, think about it. Do our own memories even work in like a linear way?
No, not at all.
Of course not. We're always revisiting the past, reinterpreting things through the lens of, our current experiences. And that's exactly what Puchner does in Dream State. He just weaves together these seemingly random moments and shows us how those past events inform our present actions and how even those childhood memories can really haunt us as adults.
It sounds like he's mirroring how our own minds work, that messy, nonlinear way memory works. Is there like a specific example from the book that really illustrates this?
Oh, there's a really powerful scene. Lana, she's an adult now, and she's struggling in her own relationship. And then suddenly, this kind of insignificant memory from when she was a kid surfaces. It's this moment of tenderness between her parents before, well, the betrayal that just shattered their family. And it's like a fleeting memory, but it totally unlocks all these emotions for Lana and forces her to reevaluate, like, her own patterns of behavior.
Wow, that's a great example of how these seemingly small moments from the past can have such a huge impact on us now.
Mm.
Like those memories become part of our emotional DNA or something, shaping our choices and how we react, even when we don't realize it.
Exactly. And it's through all these interwoven memories that Puchner really reveals the depth and complexity of his characters. We see them not as static figures, but as evolving individuals, shaped by the past, wrestling with the present, and yearning for a future that always feels just out of reach.
Yeah, it makes me think about how we all carry these hidden stories within us, these moments that have shaped who we are, even if we don't always recognize their influence.
Absolutely. And Dream State invites us to explore those hidden stories, both within the characters and even within ourselves. It encourages this introspection, prompting us to really consider how our own past experiences continue to shape our present lives.
That's a powerful idea.
Hmm.
It seems like Pushner isn't just telling a story. He's inviting us to, participate in a conversation about the human condition,
Yeah.
about the power of memory and its impact on, well, our relationships and the choices we make.
You've hit the nail on the head. And that's what makes Dream State so compelling. It's not just entertainment. It's an invitation to engage with those big life questions about love and loss and betrayal, forgiveness, and, well, the search for meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
Speaking of unpredictable, we've talked about how this novel jumps back and forth in time. Does that also add to the suspense?
Absolutely. The way it's not linear, it keeps us guessing, constantly reevaluating characters and what their motivations might be as we get new insights from different points in time. It's like, we're piecing together a puzzle, and each piece reveals a new layer of the story.
So instead of just following a timeline, we're actively engaged in uncovering the truth, much like the characters are.
Precisely. And that makes the experience so much more immersive. We're not just passive observers. We're drawn into the heart of it, experiencing the highs and the lows right alongside the characters.
You mentioned earlier how Dream State excels at developing the characters.
Hmm.
I'm really intrigued by Cece. It seems like she's trapped in this web between Charlie and Garrett, and that her choices have these lasting consequences. What insights can you offer about, well, her journey?
Cece's journey is fascinating because she really embodies both strength and vulnerability. She's so deeply affected by the betrayal, but she also makes these choices that end up shaping everything, and often in ways you wouldn't expect. So we see her trying to balance her own desires, her need for stability, and that weight of responsibility for her kids, all while navigating those complexities of love, forgiveness, and self-discovery.
Her story sounds so relatable. I mean, many of us have faced those moments where we're forced to make really tough choices, weighing our own needs against the needs of others.
Exactly. And Puchner doesn't shy away from showing us how messy human relationships really are. Cece's journey, it isn't always pretty. She makes mistakes. She hurts people. And she's haunted by those doubts and regrets. But it's through those imperfections that we connect with her, on a deeper level. We recognize our own struggles in her story.
It reminds us that even the choices we make with good intentions can have unintended consequences, and that forgiveness of ourselves and others is a lifelong process.
Beautifully put. And that idea of forgiveness, it ties into another key theme that runs through Dream State, the impact of the past on the present. We see how the characters, especially Lana and Jasper, are so shaped by the events that happened even before they were born. It's like they inherit not just their parents' love, but their mistakes, their unresolved issues, and their unhealed wounds.
It really makes you think about how we're all products of our history, both personally and as families. We carry those legacies with us, whether we realize it or not.
And Dream State explores this with such nuance and sensitivity. We see how Lana and Jasper try to come to terms with their family's past, trying to make sense of their parents' choices and forge their own paths, even while they're haunted by everything that came before.
The review mentioned something about environmental change being a theme in the book. How does that tie in with all the internal struggles the characters face?
That's where Pushner's use of symbolism gets really powerful. He sets most of the story in Montana. It's this place where nature is just breathtaking, but it's also so vulnerable to change. And as the characters deal with their own issues, we see the external landscape reflecting their emotional states.
So it's not just a backdrop, it's another character in a way, reflecting their inner turmoil and the shifting dynamics within the family.
Exactly. And one of the most striking examples is how Puchner describes the changing seasons in Montana. As the characters deal with loss, betrayal, and how fragile relationships are, we see the landscape mirroring that. Harsh winters, uncertain springs, and summers that just don't last.
It's like the environment itself is another character, like a silent witness to all the drama unfolding. I love how Puchner brings all these layers of meaning together. It makes you think not just about the characters' internal journeys, but the larger context of their lives.
He's a master at it, and it just adds so much depth and richness to the story. It makes you think about how our surroundings affect us on a deeper level, how even the physical world can reflect our internal struggles.
It all circles back to the title Dream State. It's not just about chasing dreams. It's about realizing how our dreams are shaped by the realities around us, both internal and external.
Absolutely. And this kind of back and forth between dreams and reality, between past and present, creates this dreamlike quality that's woven through the whole novel. It's a story that sticks with you, inviting you to think back on certain parts, to consider the characters' choices, and even reflect on your own experiences.
It sounds like the kind of book that starts those late night talks with friends where you're debating what the characters are thinking and what might happen next.
Exactly. And that's the real beauty of literature, its ability to connect us, to spark conversations, and to challenge those assumptions we have about ourselves and the world.
I am so ready to read Dream State now. I feel like we've already started unpacking the main themes and ideas, and I can't wait to see how they play out.
I think you're going to love it. But before we wrap up our deep dive, there's one more thing about the book I want to explore. It's that idea of ambiguous resolutions. The review mentioned how some character arcs are left open, which might bother readers who want closure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, knowing you typically enjoy those fast-paced stories with clear endings.
That's a good point. I'll admit I do like that sense of satisfaction when everything gets neatly wrapped up, but I also know that real life rarely gives us those kinds of resolutions. We're often left with questions and doubts,
Yeah.
wondering what if.
That's such a great observation. And I think Putner choosing to embrace that ambiguity shows a deep understanding of what it means to be human. Life is messy and unpredictable, and it's full of questions without answers. And instead of trying to give us all the answers, Dream State asks us to embrace that complexity, to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, and to find beauty in the open-ended nature of our own journeys.
Okay, so I feel like we've covered a lot, but there was one thing in the review that I wanted to touch on. It was that idea that the book could feel a little slow at times because of all the introspection, with my love of fast-paced narratives. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, it's true that Dream State isn't exactly a whirlwind of action and those crazy plot twists. It unfolds more gradually, like it invites you to really savor the journey instead of rushing to get to the end. And that introspective quality you mentioned, well, that's a big part of what makes it so charming. Pushner really goes deep into the characters' minds and lets us experience their thoughts and feelings and motivations in a way that's honestly kind of rare in fiction these days.
I'm starting to see that as a good thing, not a bad thing. It's like the difference between a quick phone call and a really deep conversation. Sometimes you need to slow down to really listen and absorb what the other person is saying.
Exactly. Dream State offers that kind of deep, meaningful conversation. It
Yeah.
asks us to slow down, pay attention to the nuances of the characters and the language, and let the story unfold at its own pace.
It's like that saying, life is a journey, not a destination. It feels like Dream State really embodies that, encouraging us to appreciate the journey, the small moments and insights that we might miss if we were just focused on getting to the end.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I think that's one of the reasons this book connects with people so much. It reminds us that life isn't about checking things off a list. It's about those experiences, the relationships, and the little moments of grace that happen every day.
I'm also thinking that the slower pace might actually make the emotional impact of the story even stronger. When we take the time to really get into the characters' heads, we become more invested in what happens to them, more connected to their struggles and their triumphs.
Definitely. It's like watching a flower bloom in slow motion. You see each petal unfold, revealing all these intricate details that you'd miss if you were just watching it in real time.
That is such a perfect analogy. I think it shows the power of introspection, both in books and in life. By reflecting on our experiences, questioning our motives, and really facing our own flaws, we gain a much deeper understanding of ourselves and the world.
And Dream State is like a masterclass in introspection. Through these characters, Puttner explores so many emotions: love, loss, betrayal, forgiveness, hope, even despair. He doesn't shy away from tough questions, from the messier parts of life, and how the past can still shape us.
And it sounds like he does it with such sensitivity and nuance, which is amazing.
Absolutely. His writing is beautiful and insightful. He captures those tiny details of relationships, the complexities of families, and the way memories stay with us in a way that's truly masterful.
I'm so glad we did this deep dive. It's given me a whole new way of looking at dream state. I started out hesitant about the slower pace, but now I'm really excited to experience the story and all its richness and complexity.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and don't forget, this was all put together specifically for you based on your review and what you like to read. We wanted you to really get a feel for the book's themes, the characters, and the writing, but at the end of the day, the best part of reading is that personal connection you make with the story.
That's so true. I can already feel that connection starting to form. I can't wait to read Dream State and see how it unfolds, to find those moments of revelation and insight you've talked about.
I know you'll find it really moving and enriching. And hey, if any parts or characters really stick with you, we'd love to hear what you think in your next review.
Oh, I will definitely take notes and share my thoughts. And for all our listeners out there, if you're even a little bit curious about Dream State by Eric Puchner, you should check it out. It's a story that will stick with you.
And if you'd like a deep dive on your own reading list, be sure to send us your reviews. We're always on the lookout for new literary adventures, and you might even be featured on a future episode.
Happy reading, everyone.